Hey guys, first regardsman here, and today I'll be talking about the heavy class in Space Marine 2, its strengths, weaknesses, and overall gameplay loop, so that by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of the class, whether you're a veteran player or you just picked up the game. In the tabletop, heavy intercessors are the frontline gunners of a Primaris squad, suited up in Mark X Gravis power armor, making them incredibly sturdy, while they send out gunfire volleys with heavy bolt rifles and of course, their signature heavy bolters. In Space Marine 2, the heavy reflects his tabletop counterpart by being a tanky damage dealer with a huge emphasis on ranged weaponry that can be built for an enormous amount of health and health damage reduction, making him one of the more survivable classes in the game. Heavy is also one of the easier classes to play for new players, at least with some of his setups, as he does have access to some of the more straightforward weapon options, like the multi-melta that can trivialize some of the more obnoxious enemies. He is also one of the best counter range classes thanks to his class ability we'll get into shortly, which allows him to block range fire and output his full damage safely. So if you're a player struggling with ranged enemies a lot, the heavy is one of the best choices to easily delete these guys off the map for both you and your teammates. The heavy also excels at enormous amounts of single target and AoE range damage, with unique range weapons that can only be found on this class for both close and long range combat. Now, despite having the heavy Mark X Gravis power armor, you still only have 3 armor like most classes in Space Marine 2, though you do have access to the perk Fortitude, which will grant you an additional 30% increase to your base HP, which actually makes you the second tankiest class in the entire game, only behind Bulwark. And this brings me to the heavy's class ability and starting perk. Your class ability is called the Iron Halo, and upon activation, you have an energy shield appear in front of you that will absorb all incoming range damage until it either runs out or is destroyed. This can block pretty much everything, including zoanthrope beams, neurothrope balls, and even the Vortex Beast disco lasers, and you and your teammates will also be able to shoot through your shield while it is active, making it not only a great defensive tool, but also incredible for offense, as being able to dish out your damage without worrying about being staggered or forced to dodge by heavy enemy range attacks like a Venom Cannon Warrior or Hellbrew Plasma Shot can dramatically increase your damage output. The base duration of the Iron Halo is around 15 seconds long and can be further increased with perks like Power Regulator, and you can also manually turn off your Iron Halo by pressing your ability button again while it is active, which will save you any unused energy and start your cooldown. Keep in mind though that you can't reactivate the Iron Halo even if you turn it off mere seconds after activation until it is fully recharged. And anything that knocks your character over completely, like a heavy hit from a boss, will automatically turn off your Iron Halo as well and immediately start your cooldown. The base cooldown, the Iron Halo, is also around 67 seconds long when fully drained, but this can also be sped up with perks like Field Adjustment. Beyond your Iron Halo, you also have your starting perk, which will grant you and your teammates 10% range damage reduction while within 50 meters of your Iron Halo while it's active. So basically, you just have to be planet side and your teammates will probably be caught in your protection aura. This range damage reduction can also further stack with your team perk encompassing Aegis that can take your entire team's range damage reduction to 35%, which is incredibly helpful for your squishier teammates like Tactical. And if you're curious how some of these damage reduction mechanics for health and armor even work, I do have a separate video explaining these as well. The other major unique mechanic to the heavy class is your heavy stance. When you aim down your sights with one of heavy's unique primary weapons like the heavy bolter, instead of a normal aim, you will enter heavy stance instead. This will give you significantly more control over your weapon compared to normal, but you will sacrifice a ton of your mobility, and while in heavy stance, you are unable to dodge or perform executes. And this is one of the hardest parts of heavy for newer players, as you will have to quickly press your aim key to exit heavy stance and perform a dodge when faced with melee enemies or just dangerous range attacks. But the hardest part of the heavy class and his most limiting factor is that you are permanently stuck with the balanced defense type for your parry window. This, combined with the fact that you have no melee weapon for quick stagger and are reliant on your ranged weapon even at close range, can make you more susceptible to stun locks than some of the other classes are, and the only exception for your parry window is the heroic heavy bolter that will give you a fencing one instead, which does make it one of the best heroic weapon purchases if you are intending to play the heavy class, especially for leveling, since heroic weapons have relic tier stats without any level requirement once you acquire them. And this brings me to one of the most obnoxious parts of starting the heavy class, which is the leveling process, because with the heavy, a lot of your weapons will feel like trash until you level them up. So if your heavy plasma feels like it's doing jack shit at first, don't be alarmed, because it will do damage on the relic tier eventually and even be able to one-shot entire Majora's clumps with the proper build setups. It's just you have to get through that initial hump first. Now, one of the biggest tips I can give you to help you improve your gameplay as a heavy is to utilize your backstep dodge constantly while playing this class. If you're unaware of what this even is, a backstep dodge is performed by pressing your dodge key without a directional input. Your character will do a slight jump backwards instead of a full dodge roll or dash. This is incredibly useful for multiple reasons and can be used on every single class. The first thing this helps you with is temporary invulnerability. Just like a normal dodge, your backstep will make it so you take 0 damage from enemy attack when timed properly, and this is especially helpful against Minoru Swarm since you can simply backstep to dodge their attacks and immediately start shooting or respond to a melee attack to set up a gun strike. The backstep dodge also has a faster recovery and doesn't force you out of position as much as a normal dodge would, so it is perfect for the heavy class that usually wants to hold the line with his gigantic gun. And speaking of gigantic guns, this brings us to the loadout section of the heavy class. Like I mentioned previously, the heavy has no melee weapon and is limited to a primary range weapon and secondary only. But you do have access to a lot of unique primary weapons that include things like the heavy bolter, heavy plasma incinerator, multi-melta, and pyre cannon. The heavy bolter, multi-melta, and heavy plasma are currently the overall best for this class, though the pyre cannon is pretty decent. It just doesn't have the best synergy with this class compared to the other options. You also have access to the heavy bolt rifle. This is kind of the de facto worst option on this class currently because it doesn't benefit at all from the heavy stance perks and was mainly added to this class because it's part of his tabletop codex loadout. Your secondary options are also quite extensive with access to the 2 best options in game currently with the plasma pistol and heavy bolt pistol. If you want individual builds for these weapons, there are plenty of build guides for this class and other classes on this channel that I regularly update between major patches. And as for some general tips on playing the heavy class, your major strength is being a massive damage dealer with a fat amount of damage reduction in HP, so don't be afraid to hold your ground and use your Iron Halo to lay into hordes and bosses. You are also the premier counter range class in the game since your Iron Halo lets you just ignore incoming fire while putting out your full damage potential, and the major thing that will halt your damage output is when you are forced into melee against things like a Scarab Power Sword Terminator or Lictors that can really lock you down. So when you're in the middle of operations and hard strats, make sure to play around your teammates, not only because you grant them substantial buffs for both damage and damage reduction, but also because they will help keep melee enemies off your back that will otherwise lock you down and dramatically lower your DPS. And if you do find yourself swarmed by melee units or Minoris, your stomp is incredible at setting up gun strikes and knocking away all but the toughest shield Zangors on the first stomp. And when it comes to things like Chaos Spawn and Sword Warriors, you need to be very careful as your class has little in the way of no knockback effects outside of heavy stance, with perks like heavy immunity or strategic stand. So one hit from these guys in a group can snowball into a near instant kill even with your tankiest builds. This is why prestige perks like Indomitable Spirit can be so helpful since they will allow you to respond with a gun strike in situations that would otherwise stun lock you. But this brings me to the next portion of this guide, which is a full perk tree breakdown of the heavy class. Now for the heavy class's perk tree breakdown, the heavy class has a lot of strong perks, but like his overall build variety and playstyle changes are just not that good in the game currently. So hopefully they go over these again at some point and like buff some of them up or like change them around, but for now, we're gonna go through every single one, starting off with Restoration. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession for an armor segment, the cooldown is 15 seconds. This is the best perk in this column here, mainly because armor restoration is just super strong in Space Marine 2 that will reduce any incoming melee damage to 0 even from bosses, and because of that, 1 armor restoration on a 15-second cooldown is very strong for any build option. Next perk here is multi-kill. Killing 5 or more enemies in one shot from a multi-melter restores ammo by 1. This one is okay. Like, even if you're using the multi-melta, I would still take restoration because armor restore is just that good, and your ammo economy on that gun isn't that bad anyways. The final perk here is pretty much useless with auxiliary ammunition. When your primary weapon is out of ammo, killing 7 enemies in a rapid succession restores ammo reserve by 20%. The cooldown is 30 seconds. Now, like on face value, this one doesn't look too bad, but when you realize that usually your primary weapon isn't completely out of ammo in this game anyways, because a lot of the ammo restoration on this class is drip fed to you, so being completely empty, that really doesn't happen that often. So this perk is pretty much always skipped. Hopefully they rework this one day, but for now, I would not take this. Next perk here is Thermal Boost. When a ranged weapon is 50% overheated or you have less than 50% ammo in magazine, range damage increases by 15%. This perk is not too bad if you're going for a max damage build. They did buff it up way back when to function on 50% ammo and magazine, but for the most part, I would skip over this for other options in this column, especially the next one here with Fortitude. Health increases by 30%. This is one of the best heavy perks in the entire game. A health increase of 30% makes you baseline as tanky as a Bulwark class is. You can also combine this with perks down here like Conviction for a 25% health damage reduction in your prestige perk options that make you even tankier. One of the strongest combos on this class. And Fortitude is in large part responsible for how tanky heavy is in general. So if you're going for like a top tier meta build, this is usually the best option overall. Next perk here is Strategic Stand. While in heavy stance, dealing damage restores 15% more contested health. You do not lose control from heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back, but you will not be able to move. Now, not being able to move in heavy stance really does not matter too much once you get better at the heavy class, and the higher contested health recovery here is nice for things like the heavy bolter and the heavy plasma, especially the heroic heavy plasma, but for the most part, once again, I do think Fortitude is better. But a nice thing here about the no knockback effect is that this can be redundant with perks in your perk tree like heavy immunity that give you the same effect here on your heavy stance, but if you don't take this, you can pick up Strategic Stand and make up for that instead, and that is pretty useful on a lot of the heavy builds. So if you want to do that and like build your perk tree and your weapon around a little bit differently because you have this one to make up for that lack of no knockback, that is a pretty good option. Next perk here is Enhanced Force. Melee damage increases by 30%. Melee damage on the heavy class is okay. Like, you can combine this with other things like Exponential Force if you really want to for like a super goofy melee build, but for the most part, I would skip over this one. Next perk here is Overwhelming Power. When Iron Halo is active, all team members within 10 meters deal 10% more range damage. This is just a nice little free range damage buff for you and your teammates. I pretty much always pick this one up because if you trigger this one, you can simultaneously trigger the perk over here, Brute Force, at the same time for a 25% damage buff to your range attacks in total, because Iron Halo will count as in cooldown while it is active from this one, so pretty good synergy there. Next perk here is Versatility. After switching weapons, your secondary weapon deals 20% more damage. The effect lasts until reloading or switching back to your primary weapon. I pretty much only take this with a plasma pistol because plasma is pretty much never reloading because it doesn't have a magazine, and you pretty much get the full effect while it's out. So really good for that, but on everything else, I would probably just pick up this perk instead. And the first team perk here is called Encompassing Aegis. All team members take 25% less damage from range attacks. This perk is incredible. Granting a range damage reduction to your entire team helps you a ton because you already have a starting perk here of 10% less range damage for anyone on your team within 50 meters. So stacked with this, that is a 35% range damage reduction, which really helps out teammates like the Tactical that are super squishy, and also the Tech Marine, because range damage reduction will affect armor, not just HP. So probably the best team perk overall and goes well into any build. Next perk here is Additional Supplies. Ammo capacity for all team members' primary weapons increases by 25%. This one is okay. It's not a bad perk. Like, it does help out the ammo economy of some guns, and the biggest benefit here is that this will up the total grenade capacity for things like the bolt rifle and heroic heavy bolt rifle as well, so pretty good for that. But on like most occasions, I do just take Encompassing Aegis instead. Next perk here is Bonds of Brotherhood. Reviving a team member restores them to full HP. Now, for a while, this perk was super overrated, but there are some hard strats now where getting a team member back at full HP does help out a bit. If you want to take this, it's not like a god-awful perk anymore on like all scenarios, but for the most part, like absolute difficulty and stuff like that, it's not like super valuable, and usually Encompassing Aegis will come out to more HP than this would. But, you know, if you want to take this, you definitely can. Next perk here is Adamant Will. After Iron Halo deactivates, you take 20% less health damage for 10 seconds. A 20% health damage reduction on Iron Halo deactivation is quite strong because this will come out to like a 45% health damage reduction with Conviction, so pretty good for that. Though I will say, for the most part, I do take the next perk here, Consecutive Execution, instead, because this one says killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores your equipment charge by 1. The cooldown is 90 seconds. A 90-second Melt-A-Bomb, Shock Nade, Crack Grenade, Frag even, these can solve encounters all on their own at times, so having any type of equipment restoration like that is super powerful for every build, though I will say Adamant Will is still quite strong. Next perk here is Emperor's Protection. When Iron Halo expends all its energy, 1 armor segment is restored for all team members. This perk could be pretty good. Unfortunately, Iron Halo, like, completely burning out doesn't happen that often in this game unless you're like really trying to do it. It's like maybe if you're taking this with the perk we'll get into in a bit, Wrath of the Imperium, it can be like a bit of a goofy build, but if this worked on like, I don't know, half your charge running out, it would be significantly better. But if anything interrupts your Iron Halo at all while you're using this, like you get knocked over and it turns off, that's just going to completely deplete this effect and just have you get no value from it, so pretty shit for that. Next perk here is Obdurate Bastion. Iron Halo's durability increases by 20%. This is a pretty good perk with perks here like Emperor's Protection or Wrath of the Imperium, because if your Iron Halo breaks before it runs out of charge, you won't get these perk effects, so pretty good to have a higher durability for that. But I will say the next two here are significantly better, like Field Adjustment. Iron Halo recharges 20% faster, but its durability is reduced by 25%. This is the overall best one for recharge speed, obviously, but the loss of durability can suck sometimes. And if you want like a bit of a middle ground here, Power Regulator gives you a 20% slower reduction in your Iron Halo energy loss, which also comes out to a pretty long uptime, even compared to like the recharge on Field Adjustment. But like these two are up to you. I think they're like the two best in this column here. Next perk here is Saving Grace. Reviving a squad member fully restores Iron Halo's charge in all armor segments. This perk kind of sucks. Revive perks in Space Marine 2 are not that strong, and Bonds of Brotherhood is definitely a better one than this one is. And also, this column has some pretty strong perk effects, like the next one, Brute Force. When Iron Halo is in cooldown, range damage increases by 15%. This is pretty much just a free range damage buff because you will be using your Iron Halo all the time on the heavies, so pretty much always pick this up unless you take the next one down here, which is Wrath of the Imperium. When Iron Halo expends all of its energy, enemies in a 10-meter radius take significant damage. This perk is kind of underrated. I have used this on quite a few builds. You can one-shot whole Majora's Hordes with this. It's just kind of clunky to use because just like Emperor's Protection, if anything knocks you out of your Iron Halo or your Iron Halo gets destroyed, you will lose this effect entirely, which it does suck. But when it works pretty well. Unfortunately, it is a little gimmicky, but if you want to pick this one up, it's not that awful. Next perk here for the signature tree is Offensive Capability. When active, Iron Halo deals damage over time to all enemies within 5 meters. This one is incredible. It will instant kill cultists, it will wipe out Bramble and Spore Mines, it will also just pick you up free executes and do free boss damage. You know, damage in Space Marine 2 is damage, and Iron Halo at point blank actually happens quite often, so pretty good for that. I do think it's currently the best finisher perk in all these trees here. Next perk here is Coolant Reserve. This one is hilariously bad. If both of your squad members are incapacitated, defeated, or grabbed, your primary weapon will not overheat and you deal 15% more damage. What do you fucking do? Like, I guess if you're the last guy alive, this is useful for a little bit, but the effect here is just not that strong, and a 15% buff for such a strict requirement is just not worth it. You pretty much never pick this one up. The final perk here is Conversion Field. When Iron Halo is active, all team members within 20 meters regenerate ability charge by 50% faster, or excuse me, they regenerate your ability charge 50% faster. This is a pretty good perk. It will go through walls, obviously, so like in siege mode, if you're sticking around each other, having a faster ability charge on like banners and tactical aspects is pretty nice. Though personally, for operations and hard strats, I do just take offensive capability instead, and that is pretty much everything there is for the heavy perk tree. Now for the heavy prestige perk tree, he does have 3 really good options, 1 really bad option in my opinion, and 3 mediocre ones. And now the first one we'll talk about here is Reverberating Impact. Stomp AoE radius increases by 50%. I do usually incorporate this one as my 4th option on most builds, mainly because a bigger Stomp AoE helps out with things like Bramble, Spore Mines, Cultists, and stuff like that. It will one-shot all of them, just knock them back from you, which is pretty useful, though for the most part, the Stomp on Heavy is just like a Minora's clearing tool, which isn't bad, but like a 50% radius increase doesn't always help out tremendously with that anyways, but I do pick this one up pretty often because some of the other options are not that strong. Next perk here is Auxiliary Reload. Melee kills of Extremis or higher enemies destroy pyromancer's ammo by 1 magazine. This perk is incredible on the heavy class. I pick this up on pretty much every build. Obviously, this perk will scale higher into difficulties like Absolute, Hard Stratagems, and Hard Siege because there are just way more Extremis there. But being able to solve your ammo economy or get like 200 shots back on a heavy bolter will save your life at times, so definitely grab this one. Though I will say, if you're taking a heavy bolt rifle, it's a pretty trash perk because these are all percentage based on things like the heavy plasma, heavy bolter, multi-melta, and pyro cannon because they don't actually have like a proper magazine, but the heavy bolt rifle does, so you only get back like 45 to like 60 shots. So it definitely worse on this one, but still a perk worth taking in my opinion. Now, for the next perk, I do take Conviction on pretty much every build once again. This one says when your armor is fully depleted, you will take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. 25% health damage reduction in Space Marine 2 will save your life. Now, if you combine this perk with the perk in his tree Fortitude for a health increase of 30% in base, you become incredibly tanky on this class. So tanky, in fact, that you are as tanky as like a base Bulwark with Conviction, because he also has a 30% starting HP increase and the same perk effect. So a really strong option for heavy that I do incorporate on a ton of builds. And the next perk here is Exponential Force. Melee damage increases by 100%. I think this perk is pretty shit, and melee damage increase on heavy really does not matter that much. The stomp is pretty trash in this game. There was a time on the PTS for patch 7 that you were able to use like a full melee damage build that would do a ton of damage on this guy. That is simply no longer the case. This perk is just not that useful. I would definitely take an AoE radius over this, but you know, if you want to pick this up for like a little bit of goofy melee damage, you definitely could. Next perk here is Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you not control heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. This class does not have a lot of the knockback effects at all. I pretty much always pick this perk up because it will save your life. There are points in time where a gun strike will get back your CHP where you would otherwise just get stun locked and die, so I definitely pick this up pretty much every single build for the heavy class for that reason, because otherwise the only no knockback effect you're getting on this class is stuff like heavy stance for strategic stand or things like heavy immunity on your actual weapon perk tree, so I pretty much always take the prestige perk option for that reason. Next perk here is Home Precision. Equip weapons maximum spread decreases by 25% when firing without aiming. This perk sucks. This one just needs to be reworked in my opinion. I don't really see a single use case scenario for this one, mainly because a hip fire on 90% of this guy's guns is garbage anyways. The only time you would ever use this is on like a heavy bolt rifle, but the heavy bolt rifle hip fire is not that bad anyways, so I really would skip over this pretty much every time. The final perk effect is Duelist. Perfect parry and perfect block windows increase by 25%. This is a pretty good perk effect, especially for the Heroic Heavy Bolter, because the Heroic Heavy Bolter has a perfect parry window increase of 50% already on top of a fencing window, but all of the other heavy weapons have a balanced parry window, and balanced weapons, if you're unaware, they have a 10 frame negative startup on their parry, and that means your initial parry hit will not actually trigger a perfect parry window. This will only increase the perfect parry window that happens after that initial parry window goes off. I do have a full video on the defense styles in this game that's a bit confusing, but just keep in mind that this is not as good as it sounds initially outside of things like the Heroic Heavy Bolter, but that being said, it's still a pretty strong option because any parry window increase can definitely help you out at times. And that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this guide for the heavy class. This class is a lot of fun if you're a big fan of heavy range weapons, and if you don't fully understand the base game mechanics of Space Marine 2, I also have a brand new player guide as well that will go over everything to know about defense types and game modes. But hopefully this class guide helped you, and if you like content like this, subscribe for more. If you want to catch me live to ask me questions about the game or just come hang out, you can find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description alongside a link to my community Discord. And as always, thank you for watching, take it easy, bye.